Welcome to Inspiration and Transformation from the Banks of the Ganga with Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati, an American sannyasi living at the Parmarth Niketan Ashram in Rishikesh, India. Sadhvi is president of the Divine Shakti Foundation, a charitable organization bringing education, vocational training, upliftment, and empowerment programs to women and children. Sadhvi is also Secretary General of the Global Interfaith Wash Alliance and Director of the world-famous International Yoga Festival. Join the musings of an American sannyasi as Sadhvi shares the wisdom and teachings of her guru, His Holiness Pujya Swami Chidanand Saraswatiji.
Welcome everyone to Inspiration and Transformation from the holy banks of the sacred Ganga River in the land of Rishikesh, India. How do we train the mind to do the things even it doesn't want to do? So it's a very interesting situation when you say, my mind doesn't want to do that. Because it implies that there's actually two different beings inside of ourselves, right? I want to get up early, let's say. Let's just take an example. It's a common one. I want to get up early. My mind wants to sleep till noon. I want to live a more sattvic life, a more spiritual life, but the mind says, nay, 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 let's go to the party, right? But who is that then? I mean, if you say, I want to live the sattvic life, but the mind wants to go to the parties, wants to go out and get drunk, wants to just, eat, drink, and be merry, sleep till noon. Well, who is that? And it's important to know, because if we're going to try to convince it to do something that it doesn't want to do, we have to know a little bit about who it is and where it came from. So the mind does not actually have a mind of its own. A lot of us speak about our minds as though it literally were an entirely different being. Like there's me, and then there's my mind. And we're going to try to peacefully cohabit in here, but as though it's two people. And it isn't. What is our mind? Our mind is simply the sum total. It keeps changing, of course, but at the moment it's the total of the impressions that have been put upon it. Whether from past lives, from earlier this life, things I've seen, I've experienced, the culture I'm from. So for example, let's say that my mind says, hey, don't worry about meditation, forget it, let's just go to parties and, enjoy ourselves. Well, that's going to be an impression upon the mind from perhaps sanskaras of a past life, or perhaps something as simple as the TV serials that we watch, where everybody seems to be having such a great time at the parties. They look like they're having such a great time at the bars, at the clubs, staying out all night, getting drunk, taking drugs. And you watch it enough, it creates a sanskara, an impression upon the mind. Maybe we follow some influencers on social media who we think are really great. And maybe they're always posting pictures of themselves at parties, or themselves really drunk, or, rolling out of bed at noon. It makes an impression. Then we say, well, my mind wants to do these things. No, it's just that I've put these impressions upon my mind. The mind is not bad or wrong in some sort of inherent way. It absorbs. It's like a sponge. And it absorbs what we give to it. The experiences, the sights, the sounds, what type of music we listen to, the people we hang out with. Do we hang out with people who are always saying, "Arey yaar, that was a great party last night. My God, mujhe kuch bhi yaad nahi hai. Bade maza aa gaya." Well, that's going to make an impression. Oh, that's what's fun. Okay. And this is why spiritually we talk about the importance of the power of association. When we speak about satsang, so here in this circumstance, it's us being in the presence of truth together as we deep dive into these topics. But satsang also refers simply to those you hang out with. Is it an association of truth? And this is why it's so important to pick and choose who your friends are, who you're spending time with, what TV shows you watch, what music you listen to, who you follow on social media. Because we may think, "Oh, it's harmless. What difference does it make?" Well, it's harmless as in you're not going to die from it. But it's changing the nature of your brain. And so when we start to think about how to convince the mind to do something, well, you're never going to convince the mind. I mean, who's talking in there? That's the dilemma with the mind, is it always knows what you're planning. Think about it. If you say, "Okay, today I'm going to convince my mind." Well, who's hearing you say that? Yourself, the mind, right? I mean, if I'm saying, "Today I'm going to show my mind," well, guess who you just gave a heads up to? Right? It's like a child saying to the mom or the dad, just giving you a heads up, "I'm going downstairs to eat all the chocolate chip cookies before dinner." Well, obviously the mom or the dad is going to say, "Not so fast. No, you're not." Which is why kids by nature tend not to mention in advance that they're planning to eat all the chocolate chip cookies before dinner. With the mind, though, we can't escape. You can't plan and plot of what you're going to do with the mind without the mind knowing it, without the ego knowing it. And that's where our best efforts fail. Because just as we are about to convince the mind sincerely of the benefits of getting up early, of praying, of living a sattvic life, the mind has already worked out its counter-defense. In some cases, it even preempts us. They'll see somebody meditating or somebody not going out, and the mind will say, "What a waste of a life. Look how bored that person looks. What a loser." Just to preempt the attack that we're about to give on the mind about no longer doing those things. And so this is where convincing the mind isn't really ever about convincing the mind or making the mind do something. It's all about simple patterns. It's much simpler than it sounds. If you think that you really have to convince or force the mind to do something, then you've set yourself up for a really difficult task, because the mind is a great adversary. You have created it throughout your life. You have fed it, you have molded it. And now it's there ready to be this embodiment of everything you have fed it. So it knows exactly how to get you. Today you want to end up like your grandmother, it'll say. It knows exactly where to get you. And this is where the way to, as the question says, convince the mind to do things it doesn't want to do, is don't worry about convincing the mind. Convince the body. The mind doesn't actually do anything. The mouth does it, the hands do it, the legs do it. You simply need to lay new patterns. You want to live a sattvic life? Set an alarm early in the morning, put the alarm across the room, and force your body, not the mind, the body, to get up and walk across the room. Once you're up and across the room, you're 90% there. It's the clock right next to the bed that you can just keep hitting that's the undoing of everyone. You want to live a more sattvic life? Set a system. What you are going to do. Lay new patterns. Lay new habits. And at the same time, give your mind new ways of thinking. This is one of the great powers of our mantra jap, is when our mind, by nature, by habit, is, let's say, gossiping or criticizing or negative, either about other people or about yourself. Well, instead of trying to convince it that it's wrong, and then you end up fighting both sides of a battle, you're like the people in those shows where one person plays every role. Instead of that, you actually just give the mind something else to do. You've got your mantra. And you give it new ways of being. Are you negative? Okay. Well, think of new things that you can say. Think of practices every single time you meet someone. The very first thing you have to do is think of 3 wonderful things about them. Little things. Start a gratitude practice, whatever it may be. Just start. Do not give the patterns of your mind the power and the respect of actually trying to engage in a debate with them. That just emphasizes the idea that it is its own separate thing. It's just patterns. It's patterns of chemistry, patterns of electricity. We call them thoughts. The moment it arises, just give it a new thought. Try this for a moment. I want all of you in your mind right now to just say, stop. Okay? In your own mind, just say stop really loud. Say it over and over again. Inside your mind. Can you hear it? Okay, you can open your eyes. Did everybody hear it? Is there anyone who could not hear the word stop in your own mind? Of course, we can all hear it. Now, what that shows us is we actually do have control over what goes on in our mind. Okay, close your eyes again. Start counting down from 100 by threes. Okay, so 100, 97, 94, 91. Now you keep going. I'm not going to do the rest for you. Keep going. Okay, stop. Open your eyes. Is there anyone who couldn't do it? Not the math part, but the attention part. We all could do it. So we actually do have control over our minds. You tell it to do something, it does something. You shout in it, we hear it. You give it a math problem, it'll sort it out. The dilemma is that most of the time we are not conscious. And this is where consciousness is so important. Because when we want our minds to do something that they're not patterned to do, we're going to change the question a bit. The question said something the mind doesn't want to do. But I'm going to change that, because the mind doesn't really have a mind of its own. The mind is just patterns. So we're going to change it to do something that the mind is not patterned to do. We simply lay new patterns. But in order to do that, we have to be conscious and aware, because the moment we go on autopilot, the mind goes back to its old ways. So the very best way to do what you want, regardless of the patterns of your mind, is to stay conscious, to stay aware, to stay mindful, and just quite literally to do them. And to work with the mind through mantra, through techniques, through mindfulness, through meditation, so that it doesn't run off on its own onto autopilot. And this is what discipline is. This is all the disciplines, is just to train us to repattern the mind. The good news is, when I was studying neurology 26, 27, 28, 29 years ago, we thought that once you hit late adolescence, once the brain had finally myelinized, meaning that the sheaths that surround the axons in the brain, once that finally happened, that the brain no longer could be changed, that was sort of the final step in the solidification of the brain. And it typically happens around late adolescence. So the running theme in neurology and psychoneurology at that time was, can't change the brain after late adolescence or early 20s. The best you can do is give it medicine. You're depressed, here's a pill. You're anxious, here's a pill. You've got an addiction, here's a pill. Because we can't do anything else. The brain is set. Fortunately, over the last few decades, the science of neurology has actually come about a full 180 degrees. We now know that basically everything you do changes your brain. If you're used to wearing shoes and you suddenly start to go barefoot for a week, your brain will actually change. If you take these two fingers and you tape them together for a week, your brain will change. If you take your arm, let's say you're right-handed, and you take your arm, don't bother breaking it. Just take it, stick it in a sling, so you can't use it for a week. Your brain will change. Spend a week starting to learn a foreign language, a language you don't already speak. Your brain will change. And I don't just mean temporarily, not like alcohol or drugs or adrenaline changes it momentarily. But actually it will start to change in a semi-permanent to permanent way. This is why people who, for example, broke their dominant hand when they were kids and had their right hand, let's say, in a cast for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and had to do everything with their left hand, when they're 40, 50, 60 years old, they're still much more ambidextrous than others. That which happened for 6 weeks, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, changed the brain in a way that it stays with them forever. So our brains can keep changing. But we have to do something to make them change. So don't bother with the fingers or the feet. I mean, it changes, but not in useful ways. Start changing your brain in useful ways. Through changing how you live. Changing your habits. It's hard at first. A habit is a habit. Just like it's hard to start writing with your left hand when you break your right one. But eventually it happens. And then those new habits, those new ways of being, stay with you.
You're listening to OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single
Circle of Hearts Radio is a sanctuary on the airwaves. Join me, Grandmother Elia, in the circle on Sunday 2 p.m. Eastern as I share information to both enlighten and nourish your soul.
Hi, this is Christina Ricci with RAIN. Every 2 minutes, another American is sexually assaulted. If you or someone you know has been sexually assaulted, you are not alone. Help is just a call or click away through the National Sexual Assault Hotline. Please call 1-800-656-HOPE, that's HOPE, or visit rain.org, that's RAINN.org.
Brought to you by RAIN and this station.
Welcome back to Inspiration and Transformation. I'm so glad to have you all back here with me. For me, the easiest way to think about this is the wave in the ocean. Okay? So when we talk about us and God, on the one hand, on the core, deep spiritual level, especially in traditions of Advaita Vedanta, we're told there is nothing but God, right? Nothing but God, everything else is an illusion. And we chant mantras. Soham, I am that. Aham Brahmasmi. I am God. So that's on one core, foundation, highest, deepest truth. We're going to call that ocean. But for the example, you have to imagine that the ocean is infinite. So it's not Pacific Ocean, Atlantic Ocean, Indian Ocean, but just an infinite ocean. We're going to call that oceanness, yoga. The union that yoga speaks about is that. The awareness that there is no separation. That union of this self to the divine self. That ultimate samadhi is that awareness. There is no difference. But then there's waveness. And the waveness is us here in this human existence. And that's not an illusion. Any more than a wave on the ocean is an illusion. It's not an illusion. If you think it's an illusion, go out and try to swim in a tsunami. You're going to realize very quickly this wave is not an illusion. So it isn't an illusion in terms of an optical illusion. But it isn't the highest truth. Meaning, if I took a spoonful of a wave and I gave it to a scientist and he looked at it or she looked at it under a microscope, they wouldn't say this is a wave. They would say ocean. Whatever shape it's in, big wave, small wave, fast wave, slow wave, tsunami. At the core, it's all ocean. Take a spoonful of it, look at it under a microscope, ocean. In the same way, the core of who we are is divine. No separation, no difference. That which is not born doesn't die, as Bhagavan Krishna teaches us in the Gita, right? Cannot be burned by fire, cannot be dried by the wind, cannot be cut by knives, cannot be wet with water. Just soul. And yet, cut this body, it bleeds. We see a starving child on the road. Tears come to our eyes. We see our rivers being polluted. Tears come to our eyes. Somebody falls down right in front of us. Well, okay, so on one level, it's all God. That person falling is all an illusion. And yet, ask any spiritual master whether the fact that this is an illusion means you don't need to bend down and help him up. And everyone is going to say, you better bend down and help that person up. Because that is your dharma as a human being. And so we've got this oceanness and we've got this waveness. And yes, the oceanness is a higher, fuller, more eternal truth. Because the wave rises and then the wave recedes. We have a body, then we no longer have a body. Then we have another body. Then we no longer have that body. Then we have another body, just like the waves. So the eternal truth is you are God. And even in your bodies, you are still God. Like even when the wave is a wave, it is still ocean. It never stops being ocean just because it has risen as a wave. In the same way, we don't stop being God just because we have taken birth and form. But now we have another truth as well, which is this existence. And in this existence, this karmic package, it's kind of a full package. And it comes with all kinds of ego and all kinds of ignorance and all kinds of desires, all kinds of patterning, mostly that we get in our early childhoods. And we carry it with us in our life. And that ignorance is what blocks us from the shining light of the divine. And so when we pray for the light to shine, you're right, it's actually an incorrect phrase. The prayer actually should be, please remove the curtains from my eyes, rather than please shine on me. Because of course grace is always shining, but we are not aware because we are living in ignorance. We've got these curtains of ego, these curtains of our identification that makes us feel very small. I am this body, I am my job, I'm my career, I'm my relationships, I am my bank account. And so life becomes really kind of stressful, right? And so in that stress, where we're constantly wanting more beauty, more youth, more wealth, more money, more prestige, higher on the ladder, we end up cutting ourselves off just in our minds, just in our awareness, from that oceanness. It's like we've risen as the wave and now our identity is, I am exactly 4 seconds old and I am 5 feet tall. Oh wait, now I'm 5'2". Now I'm 5.5. And I am made of this many liters of water. Right? You would laugh. Hare wave, you are ocean. You are infinite. You are not 4 seconds old. It's just 4 seconds in this particular waveform, but how many waveforms you've been in before that? So our identification as this story, what's happened to me, how I've been wronged or I've been betrayed or cheated or I got the short end of the stick and now this guy owes me. Our stories, our dramas. I'm the one who has to do all of the work. Nobody else helps out. I'm never appreciated enough. These stories that ruin our lives. And so we pray, and you're right, rather than praying, oh, shine on me, we should really pray, oh, open my eyes. Remove the curtains so that I can see. Because it's always there, but we can't see it. And that's why, going back to this, we were speaking about the Guru mantra. The word Guru literally means the remover of the darkness and the one who brings light. Now, the light that the Guru brings, it's not that the Guru is shining a flashlight on himself or herself. People sometimes ask, how do you know if it's the right Guru? And I always say there's no equation for that. But I can tell you when you know it's the wrong Guru. If the only light they're looking to shine is on themselves, you might want to think before progressing closer. Because the light that the Guru shines is so that we can see ourselves. The Guru shows us the light in ourselves. How? By removing the darkness. By removing those curtains. By opening our eyes. And so, yes, you're right, there is no separation. And yet, tragically, most of us don't move through the world feeling like we are being showered in light. Most of us feel very separate. Most of us pray, please grace, please light, please God. When really what we should be praying is, please empty me of all of that is keeping me separate from God, separate from grace, separate from light. That ego, that ignorance, those attachments. And then the light is always there.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Like Baldwin with People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. I grew up loving circuses and other traveling animal shows, but it never occurred to me what life might be like for the animals. Training wild animals to do things they don't understand takes force. Routine discipline with a hook or whip with the heel of a boot shows the animal exactly who's the boss. Don't patronize animal acts. Please contact People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals.
757-622-PETA.
Welcome back. This is Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati with inspiration and transformation. Is it possible to be both materially successful and spiritually focused? Material success and spiritual focus are not mutually exclusive at all. Sometimes people think that in order to be spiritual, it means you have to renounce all of the actual possessions. You have to become a complete renunciant. You can't have a nice house. You can't have a nice car. You can't have nice things. And that's not true at all. It's not the things that block you from a spiritual path. There's no house in the world that blocks us from being able to be spiritually awakened, enlightened, connected. The dilemma is where our mind is focused. So success comes. To some people, it comes through a certain job they have, a certain skill they have. To some people, it comes in an inheritance. Other people win the lottery. I mean, money and physical things come in so many different ways. But they're not the actual problem. The problem is the mental attachment to having more. So having a beautiful car, not a problem. As long as, if tomorrow you don't have a beautiful car, you're still anchored and grounded spiritually. The problem is actually in the mind. If I am focused on, I need to have a car. I need to have a nice car. This guy has a nicer car than I do. Why do I only have a Honda? This guy's got a Mercedes. That's not fair. I want the Mercedes. And of course, tragically, why do we usually want the Mercedes? It's not so much that it's a better drive. It's to show people. I want the Mercedes so that this guy knows I've got the Mercedes. I want the Mercedes so that everybody understands, oh, she's such a success. I want the big house, not because I actually need 9 bedrooms when there's 3 people in the house, but I want the big house taki everyone who comes will say, wow, kya bodyguard hai, amazing. Kahan pahunch gaye. And that everybody will respect me, be envious of me, think that I am some very great person. So that's the dilemma. It's not the house, it's not the car. It's the mind's attachment to those things that makes us stuck. And it's especially what the mind thinks we're going to get from it. So if I think from this big house, from this big car, from these diamonds, from this beautiful new sari or new pair of fancy shoes, I'm going to feel happy. That's the problem. That's what keeps us from being spiritually awakened or connected. The actual shoes, not an issue. It's the mind that is focused on, oh God, I wish I could have those expensive shoes, then everybody would like me, then I would be really popular. So you can be materially successful. And you can be deeply spiritually focused, grounded, aware, awake. Not a problem. As long as your mind is focused and grounded spiritually. For me, the best way of understanding this is Lanka was a city made of gold, right? And who was the head of Lanka? So Lanka was what type of a city was Lanka? With Ravan at the head, is Lanka a place you'd want to live? Huh? Were they selling expensive real estate in Lanka when Ravan was in charge? No, right? And now, even now, when we think about Lanka, talk about Lanka, it's sort of synonymous with kind of living in hell, right? I mean, the city was made of gold, but when you're run by a demon, nobody would want to live there. Well, think about Dwarka. What was Dwarka made of? Well, Krishna was the head, Krishna was the head. What was the city made of? It was also made of gold. Dwarka was also made of gold. But the head, as you said, was Krishna. So is Dwarka a city we'd like to live in? Right? Dwarka's like a special kind of heaven. Living under Lord Krishna. So it's not the gold. The gold isn't the problem. Lanka was made of gold, Dwarka was made of gold. The problem was the difference between heaven and hell, simply who was running the show. Ravan was running the show, it's Lanka, nobody wants to be there. Krishna's running the show, it's heaven, everybody wants to be there. So that's the issue with the material success, is have the prosperity, no problem. But make sure that who's running your show is Krishna, meaning the divinity, rather than Ravan, meaning the embodiment of greed and ego, lust, that demonic nature. So stay grounded in the divinity, the Krishna in you. And then whether your city is made of gold or your city is made of wood, it's not going to matter. Either way, it's going to be heaven, because you're being run by that divine presence. So before taking any of the other questions that came in advance, does anyone here have any questions?
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth Radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Like Baldwin with People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. I grew up loving circuses and other traveling animal shows, but it never occurred to me what life might be like for the animals. Training wild animals to do things they don't understand takes force. Routine discipline with a hook or whip with the heel of a boot shows the animal exactly who's the boss. Don't patronize animal acts. Please contact People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals.
757-622-PETA.
Welcome back. This is Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati with Inspiration and Transformation. What's more important, the teacher or the teaching? So it's interesting because usually we get the teaching from the teacher. Usually they are one and the same. But if we had to pull it apart, because of course sometimes maybe we get a teaching, but there wasn't a teacher. Sometimes maybe we have a teacher who doesn't seem to be giving teachings. So they both have their own power. Obviously together when you have a teacher giving teachings, but even separately. So for example, the power of the teacher, when that teacher is really a guru. In the West, sadly, there's kind of a misunderstanding. And the word guru frequently gets mistranslated as teacher. Well, a guru is much more than a teacher. The word guru literally means the one who removes darkness and brings light. An easy way to think about it is if you were studying oceanography, let's say, in school, you could have the best oceanography teacher. You could spend 3 hours in a lecture hall. You could learn everything there is to know about the ocean. How deep it is, how wide it is, how far it is from coast to coast, what it is that lives there. But at the end of class, you would still be dry. Whereas if you had an oceanography guru rather than teacher, at the end of the class, you would still know the depths of the ocean, what lives in the ocean, the details of the ocean. But at the end of that class, your clothes would be soaking wet. The guru gives not just a teaching, but actually an experience. So when we talk about the teacher, it's a teacher who's a guru, who's giving an experience. Now, sometimes the guru gives an okay, sit down. I'm going to give you a teaching. Here's a pravachan. Here's satsang. Here's a meditation instruction. And then we have gurus like Raman Maharishi, who just were there. Their simple presence was the teaching. Every once in a while, a word or two. And there's no one. I was not blessed enough to have his darshan in form, but I know a lot of people who were disciples of his. And no one has ever said, God, I wish he gave more teachings. Everyone understood and felt his presence is the teaching. Just that energetic transmission is the teaching. So if you have a guru, a powerful teacher who isn't giving any teachings, or maybe the teachings seem not so damwale or not in a language you understand, don't worry. What it means is that this guru is one who is teaching through energy, teaching through presence. There's a beautiful story about Bhagwan Bodh, who was in a village. Everybody was very excited to have his darshan, to hear his teachings. The whole village gathered together. He came, he sat. And he sat. And he sat, and everybody, at the beginning they thought, Cello, Dhyan Kardana. They all closed their eyes. Slowly they thought, what is going on? One by one they started opening their eyes and looking at him. He was just sitting. It wasn't even like his eyes were closed in meditation. Just sitting. People kept waiting and waiting and waiting. When is he going to speak? And he just kept sitting. And finally, after a few hours of just sitting, he stood, blessed them, and left. Some of his disciples went to him afterwards and said, what happened? You were there to give a teaching. Everybody was waiting for a teaching. And he said, that was a group of people who don't even understand my silence. If they don't understand my silence, how are they going to understand my words? First, let them understand my silence. And only then do we move into words. I know Puja Swamiji speaks about his guru, who also never sat him down and gave him teachings like this. He just walked with him, blessed him, gave him mantra, gave him experiences, slapped him a whole bunch, literally. Gave him teachings in life. Never a formal teaching, but that power of a transmission. So if you've got a teacher who is a powerful transmitter, that is the teaching. And then, of course, there are teachers sometimes where the teaching is beautiful. The teaching is perfect. But then we hear stories. Maybe that teacher isn't so perfect. Scandals come. Issues arise. People say, oh, I don't know. Mene yehi suna, wo suna. But what about the teachings? The teachings were so beautiful. We hear this so frequently. There's this scandal or that scandal. The divine is very compassionate and very frequently sends perfect teachings through very imperfect teachers. And that's also fine. A lot of people have come who have had scandals around their particular teacher, whether he or she was actually a guru or just a yoga teacher or a meditation teacher. And they'll come and they'll say, but I don't know what to do. The teachings were so great. The teachings were so beautiful. They impacted me. They touched me. They changed me. They showed me some light where there was darkness. But that teacher, I heard this or I heard that. Does that mean that I need to throw away the teachings? And of course the answer is no. Just because a teacher is unable to live by or embody his or her own teachings doesn't mean that they are less perfect or less true or less beneficial for you. So if you've had a beautiful experience with teachings that are touching and transformative to you, don't worry. If the teacher is also touching and transformative and powerful, wonderful. Consider yourself doubly blessed. But if not, don't worry. Take the teachings, live the teachings. That's what you were meant to get. The teacher was just a channel for you to get those teachings.
This brings to a close this hour of inspiration and transformation. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad to be together with you all each week. And I look forward to being together again next Thursday, same time, on OMTimes Radio.